What is up, TFA fam? Welcome into another edition of the Fantasy Authority podcast. It is, boys, Cody and Kev rocking with you. We're going to walk you through our Week 13 running back rankings, getting you guys ready for the last week before playoffs kick off. So, without further ado, we're just going to jump right into this, Kev. Let's go ahead and start looking at the running back one rankings for the week. Again, if you're just checking this out on YouTube, you'll see the ranks on the graphics on the screen right now. If you're listening to us on podcast form, I'm going to run through these and we're going to chop it up on some of the guys who we think are most interesting on the week. So looking at this right now, Dalvin Cook, Derrick Henry, James Robinson, Miles Sanders, Nick Chubb, Josh Jacobs sitting at 6. Not a lot to talk about here. Somebody I do want to bring up, however, Kevin, in your rankings is having Josh Jacobs sitting there at the 6th spot. He's somebody who I feel like in this particular matchup, especially, I might have outside of RB1. You have him kind of sitting here in the middle. What are your thoughts on Josh Jacobs going up against the Jets, and especially a defense that you always poignantly point out that is the strength of their defense, right? I think they are like 8th in rush DVOA right now. They are giving up, I believe, the 11th or 12th most half PPR points, but I feel like a lot of that rides on some of their big weeks where they just got gashed, like against the Giants. So, just your thoughts on Josh Jacobs here.
Well, one, we had a little bit of scare with Josh Jacobs, who injured his ankle in the game against the Falcons and was really at the beginning of the week. Sunday night was looking like it could have been a really serious injury, but he looks like he avoided the serious injury and just called it a minor ankle injury, and he is confident he's going to play this week. I don't know if the Raiders will rush him out there. So it is possible that Josh Jacobs could miss this week, and we could be looking at Devontae Booker as the starting running back this week. So that is something to monitor with Josh Jacobs. But if he's able to play, I just feel like this is a game. While one, I definitely think this will be a bounce back game for them. And while I agree, I do respect this Jets run defense. Like, it is better than what people will give it credit for. But at the same time, I think that we know that the Raiders are a team that wants to run the football, and they will continue to pound the rock. If they can get down inside the red zone, which should be something they're able to do and bounce back in this spot, then I think he could find the end zone a couple of times. So I think Josh Jacobs is a decent play. Listen, this week there's some really rough matchups across the board. Like, there's not like a lot of really juicy matchups, a lot like there was last week, where there's just like all these games that you really want to you really feel confident about. So Josh Jacobs, I think is fine. And while it's not the best matchup, it's also not the worst matchup for him either.
To run things out here, and a couple guys I want to touch on as well. Antonio Gibson at 7, David Montgomery for the brand finally had that big game. Austin Eckler, DeAndre Swift, Chris Carson, and then Clyde Edwards-Helaire sitting there at 12. Austin Eckler, we had a bunch of questions about him on our Sunday show, whether or not they should start him, people just being, a little hesitant. Well, we did not have to worry about that. Had like 70% of the snaps, saw something like double-digit targets. There was no
16. Yeah. 16.
Yeah. Just absolutely ridiculous. There was no easing him in whatsoever. So I am a little surprised to see him sitting down here at 9 for you. Montgomery, like I said, we finally got that big week out of him. We saw what he can do if he just gets a little bit of room. Now, granted, a lot of his, I think half of his rushing yards came on that big 57-yard run. I'm pretty sure that like even me and you might have been able to get at least like 8 yards on, because it was just an absolutely wide open lane for him to run through. But I do like he has another really good matchup against Detroit this week, so I think you can confidently run him out as your RB2. On this list, was there anybody that you kind of went back and forth on? And I do want to get your thoughts on Antonio Gibson, because obviously that matchup with the Steelers is not good on paper. We've seen them be had against like the Miles Sanders popped off on some big runs against them. Obviously Antonio Gibson can do the same thing. And then same thing with the Ravens. J.K. Dobbins had a really nice game against them as well. Gibson has gone, I think 4 of his last 5 games have been top 10 PPR scoring weeks for running back. Just your thoughts on this, because he hasn't been involved as a pass catcher as much as we would like and as much as we thought he would coming into the year. So just your thoughts on Gibson, and then I would like to get your thoughts on DeAndre Swift as well.
Yes, I'm not as worried about the matchup against the Steelers. And I know, again, another situation where people will look at the Steelers and say that, well, the Steelers have been, great against the run. The thing is that they have been beaten on the ground. Like we talk about it. They allowed 250 rushing yards to the Ravens. Multiple teams have been able to run the football. Where they have excelled is not allowing a rushing touchdown. They've only allowed 5 rushing touchdowns on the season, and that has really helped them in terms of, I think our perception of them as a defense. Like, they've done a really good job, and once you get inside the red zone, of limiting teams and being able to score. But Antonio Gibson, I think, is just like, we finally, he's somebody that we talked a lot about over the offseason, during our rookie rankings and stuff like this, talking about him and how explosive he could be. Like, this dude is a real deal. Like, I think he is going to end up being an elite level running back, like a top 5 running back as soon as next year. Like, this dude is the truth. And we saw it last week against Dallas, where he had 70% of the snaps. He had 20 carries. He's also heavily involved in the passing game. He was targeted 7 times, 5 receptions, 136 total yards, and 3 total touchdowns. But the dude's scored a touchdown in every single week since week 7. So, like, he's finding the end zone. They're giving him the goal line work. The dude is the truth. And so I like Antonio Gibson quite a bit. I'm not as nervous about this Pittsburgh run defense as some other people will be. And so I do like Antonio Gibson. He's an absolute must start. Moving on to David Montgomery. Love David Montgomery. He's somebody we talked about a lot in our buy-sell shows before the trade deadlines passed, of somebody that people should be looking to acquire. Their schedule is so good the rest of the way. I would not be surprised from here on out if he is a RB1 the rest of the season. Over the remainder of the rest of the season, could win people some leagues. Like, he is getting all the opportunities. We saw it in his first game back, 88% of the snaps. He rushed the ball 11 times. He ran 37 routes, which you love to see it. Love to see it, especially from David Montgomery, somebody who's not typically known as a pass catcher. But with Tariq Cohen out for the year, he really has evolved as a pass catcher. And so he was targeted 6 times, 3 times inside the red zone, 5 receptions, 143 total yards, and a touchdown against Green Bay. And now this week they get to face a Lions run defense that is absolutely atrocious. They allow the most fantasy points in position. It doesn't matter whether it's rushing or receiving. They've been terrible against that as well. They've allowed 543 receiving yards, 7 touchdowns, which is the most by far to any running back in the league. So just a great matchup for David Montgomery. So I really like him. I think you can start him with confidence. Austin Eckler, happy to see him back. Happy to get some of these guys back finally, right? Like, Austin Eckler's been out for a lot of the season, so it's good to see him back. DeAndre Swift, I really believe he's going to be back this week again, kind of like Kenny Golladay. It sounds like he was getting close to return last week, but he just didn't have enough time with Thursday. I think if they would have played on Sunday, we would have had DeAndre Swift. Now, this week against the Bears have been better against the pass than they have against the run. They are a defense that you can run on, but they also utilize him as a pass catcher. So I do think DeAndre Swift is somebody that I have as an RB10. I think he's somebody that's probably going to be an RB1 rest of season. I think you can fire him up with confidence. Chris Carson, it was good to see him back finally after missing 2 or 3 weeks with that foot injury. It felt like they were easing him in a little bit. They did use Carlos Hyde more than I expected, but he was involved as a pass catcher. And, when you're tethered to Russell Wilson, I think those are good things. So I think you can start Chris Carson with confidence this week. And then Clyde Edwards-Helaire is actually a guy that I went back and forth with, because he's just been all over the place this year. In games that they can throw the ball, they're going to throw the ball. And that's exactly what they did last week, which you can't really blame them, because, Tyreek Hill went absolutely nuclear, went 200 yards in the first quarter. And it was wild watching that game unfold. But, with Clyde Edwards-Helaire, he's had some good weeks and he's had some bad weeks, but this week they get Denver. This is a matchup at home that I think that they can exploit, and a matchup that they could we could see them run the football a little bit more. The last time they faced them, let's see, it was the game that they just absolutely manhandled them in that game. He only needed to rush 8 times, but he did have 1 reception, 63 total yards, but he also found the end zone. But prior to this week, we started to see Clyde Edwards-Helaire come on a little bit more. He had 12.4 against Carolina, and then he had 20.7 against the Raiders. Obviously, last week was not good. He did run the ball 11 times for 27 yards, played 58% of the snaps. We're starting to see his snap share rise again. So I think you can expect him to play around 60% of the snaps. So he is a little bit dangerous because we know if the Chiefs are able to throw the football, that's all they're going to do, and they're not going to run the ball as much. Like, he hasn't had over 15 carries since week 6 against Buffalo when he had 26 carries. So, like, he's not getting as much usage, and he's not being heavily involved in the passing game. So those things are concerning. But when you get to play with the Chiefs, he can find the end zone at any moment. So that is why I think Clyde Edwards-Helaire deserves to be here. And I know some people are going to say, but Kevin, where is Aaron Jones? Where is Ezekiel Elliott? Where is Alvin Kamara? And I guess we're about to talk about that.
Oh, we are. People are either, listening to this, watching this, and just probably have veins popping out of their face, flipping tables over, just wondering what the hell has Kevin lost his mind. Here are the RB2 rankings for week 13 for Kev. Kicking things off at 13, the aforementioned Alvin Kamara. Zeke Elliott coming in at 14, Aaron Jones, Nyheim Hines, J.K. Dobbins, Kareem Hunt, Kenyon Drake, Wayne Gallman, Duke Johnson, Gio Bernard, Benny Snell, and then Melvin Gordon wrapping things up at 24. We can't waste any more time. We got to get into this. Kev, we have Aaron Jones is sitting at Fantasy Pros consensus 6 in PPR rankings, and Alvin Kamara is sitting at 8. You don't even have them in the top 12. Speak to the folks. Well, real quick, I know you're going to get into why you have them ranked here. If you are setting a lineup this week in a must-win situation, do you have the cojones to sit sit, obviously depending on who you have. Would you possibly sit Kamara and Aaron Jones and even Zeke Elliott for that matter if you have, the luxury? Most people don't, obviously, but let's say you had 2 or 3 solid running backs. Would you potentially think about setting any of these top 3 running backs in your RB2 rankings?
I think you could sit Alvin Kamara if you wanted to, yes. Listen. Just not seeing the pass volume that we're accustomed to seeing him to. And he's only playing 50% of the snaps, which is a problem. He's still getting some opportunity as a runner, but I mean, last week, so in week 11, which is the same matchup against this Atlanta Falcons defense, which Atlanta Falcons run defense has been pretty good this year, and then Denver. So let's look at it. He had 13 carries. He ran 9 routes. He's typically running 30, anywhere from 20 to 30 routes in a game. He ran 9 routes against Atlanta, 1 target, 0 receptions, 45 total yards, and was saved a little bit by a touchdown. Last week against Denver, 50% of the snaps, 11 carries, 14 routes, a little bit better, but only 2 targets, 1 reception, 52 total yards, 0 touchdowns. Listen, with Taysom Hill back there, it just changes things with this offense because Taysom Hill, they are utilizing him so much as a runner. It's like Tim Tebow. So he's not looking to check down to Alvin Kamara like we see Drew Brees do, which has really affected Alvin Kamara right now, which is obviously an opportune time for this to happen because we're coming up on the fantasy playoffs, and Alvin Kamara has really hurt his fantasy owners. Would it surprise me if Alvin Kamara bounced back and looked a little bit more like Alvin Kamara? No, but I'm not counting on it because we have not seen anything now. We've seen 2 weeks in a row with Taysom Hill not looking to target him in the passing game. And if that's the problem, that is a huge problem because, I mean, let's look prior to this. 5, 9, 13, 3, 8, 8, 9, 5, 7. Those are all of the games. Those are all of his reception numbers over the with Drew Brees. Targets 8, 9, 14, 4, 10, 8, 13, 6, 8, and then the last 2 is 1 and 2. It's a problem. And so, yes, I think if you have the luxury, let's say if you had Antonio Gibson, David Montgomery,
James
Robinson, right? If that's where you're lucky enough to have, yes, I would strongly consider sitting Alvin Kamara because we have seen enough now that this is going to be an issue for him. Now, the good news is if you can make it that far, week 15, Drew Brees is expected to be back. So I'm not telling people to outright sit him. you would have to have like a really strong collection of running backs to be able to actually make that happen. But just like whenever on the Sunday show, when people ask us about, what do you do with Alvin Kamara? We said, like, I don't know if I'd have the guts to do it this 1 week after 1 week of sample size to be able to make that call, but like it was certainly some in the range of possibilities, and it was right. And so here we are again. And yes, it's something that you could do. Am I telling people they should? Not necessarily. But if you have the options, something you could do. Now, Ezekiel Elliott's tough. I thought about having a little higher. It's really going to depend on the injury situation, the COVID situation for Baltimore. They play on Monday. So we'll have to see, who they get back, who they don't, which could change some things. I could actually move them up much higher if we find out they're going to be without a lot of players. So that's where I have him. Aaron Jones. Listen, Philadelphia's rush defense has been really good, like really, really good. And so I could see a situation here where Philly looks to throw the ball because that's how you beat the Eagles. They are a team that really struggles stopping the pass, but they're really good against the run. And so Aaron Jones, if he doesn't see a ton of pass catching volume, I think this could be a rough game for him. So I am a little bit lower on him than others. I still think, again, same kind of Alvin Kamara. For most people, you're going to be playing him and you're going to start him. He's somebody that does have a much higher ceiling in terms of pass catching volume and stuff like that. So I do think that maybe where I have him is a little bit low, but I don't think it's egregious. And so, some of the other guys I have on this list, J.K. Dobbins, I do expect him to be back. I think there's a possibility he could actually be back on Wednesday when they play Wednesday afternoon against the Ravens, but he's definitely will be back for the Monday night game. So that is good news for J.K. Dobbins. Kareem Hunt is Kareem Hunt. They're going to continue to heavily involve him. Like, he's a strong RB2, even with Nick Chubb back. Kenyan Drake, it was actually good to see him. Like, he finally had a decent game. I wouldn't say it's like it was an amazing game. Some people on Twitter like acting like that he just went off, and like that's really not what happened. He had a good fantasy performance, but I think he had like 70 rushing yards, but he's found the end zone twice, which really helps him out. So Kenyan Drake, I think, is a decent play against the Rams. And then you got Wayne Gallman, who Mr. Consistency, Mr. Wayne Gallman, every single week is going to get you that 15 to 18 fantasy points. He's not sexy. He's not going to get you 30, but he's somebody that is Mr. Consistency and a solid flex play. Duke Johnson, I think, could see more targets now with Will Fuller out of the mix. And so I do like Will Fuller or Duke Johnson a little bit. Gio in a better matchup against the Dolphins this week. I think could, as a solid RB2. And then Benny Snell I have on here because as of right now, James Conner may not play after testing positive. I wouldn't expect him to play. So then Benny Snell, I think, is somebody that people could look at. And then Melvin Gordon, I have some interest in. And then if Philip Lindsay doesn't play, then I think I could actually have Melvin Gordon a lot higher. The Chiefs are terrible against the run. But the question will be, are they going to continue to run the ball if they get down quickly to the Chiefs on Sunday Night Football? So Melvin Gordon, I think, is also at least a low-end RB2, high-end RB3. And somebody I could probably have as like a middle, maybe upper RB2 if Philip Lindsay were to miss.
The word after the game was that Philip Lindsay, quote, tweaked his knee a little bit, according to Fangio. We still haven't heard anything on the severity of that. J.K. Dobbins, I would absolutely fire up. I would have no qualms about doing that. I think we saw him starting to take that backfield over. Obviously, that matchup sets up really well for him going up against Dallas, who has just been run all over by everybody. And, through the air, on the ground, doesn't matter. Dallas is just giving it up to everybody out here. Doesn't matter. Kareem Hunt is actually being ranked on Fantasy Pros consensus as a top 10 back. We thought we were going to get that last week going up against Jacksonville. Hunt, oddly got shut out of the passing game, which was a little weird to see. I think it's just one of those just little weird 1 week kind of things. I definitely would not expect that going forward. He only put up he did have a nice 6 yard per carry average, but 6.2 ain't going to get it done, especially if you're trying to win to get in. But I think you can go right back to him this week and plug him in as an RB2. Tennessee, I think, there's only 6 teams giving up more fantasy points per game to running backs than Tennessee, and Dallas is actually right above them with J.K. Dobbins. So I would feel super comfortable going back to both of them. And then Gio Bernard, I also like, obviously, in PPR leagues as well. So let's roll over to the RB3s, and we'll start to close this out. Myles Gaskin, who should be returning this week, is going to kick things off at 25. Latavius Murray, Raheem Mostert, who made his return, J.D. McKissick, Cam Akers, Jonathan Taylor, Damian Harris, Zach Moss, Todd Gurley, Frank Gore, Chase Edmonds, and then the man who found the end zone twice on the ground somehow, James White, finishes things off here as with the RB3s at 36. Man, I really wish we could trust Cam Akers a little bit more. He's been the only running back who has shown any sort of explosiveness, since the beginning of the year. Darrell Henderson started to look like that, but he's been faltering. Akers is ripping off big chunk yardage, but it just seems like McVay is perfectly fine with just giving, 10 to Akers, 8 to Malcolm, and then another 8 to Henderson. Hopefully this starts to get cleared up, because Cam Akers should absolutely be leading that backfield. I think he gives the most versatility, like I said, explosive, dynamic playmaker, especially in space. It's good to see Raheem Mostert come back, but that is another committee situation that's just kind of hard to get a gauge on, especially with all of their offensive woes. Who was sticking out here to you? I mean, obviously for your brand, the Jonathan Taylor hate stays strong here with with having him as a mid RB3. Touch on a couple of these guys who you think are interesting plays for Week 13.
Well, one, I'm going to start off with Latavius Murray, because I actually thought about putting him as an RB2, but I settled on a high-end RB3, because we saw it last week. We've actually seen it the last 2 weeks. I mean, he's playing almost nearly 50% of the snaps. 12 carries, 19 carries last week. He's running routes. He's actually seeing more targets than Alvin Kamara is, which are actually, I should say, the same. Because in week 11, he saw 2 targets, and then last week he saw 1 target, 3 receptions. But he has 85 yards against the Falcons, and then he had 126 total yards and 2 touchdowns last week against Denver. Like, he looks like the preferred option right now, and the one that's really making the most of this opportunity with Taysom Hill back there, because they're wanting to run the football so much. He has seen, like I said, 31 total touches or 31 carries, 34 total touches over the last 2 weeks. And so Latavius Murray is certainly in place of people that hopefully added him and, have been stashing him, which you should have, because if anything were to happen to Alvin Kamara, then Latavius Murray we knew was a smash play. But now with Taysom Hill, like, they just prefer to run the football and just slam it down your throat. And that's really what they've been doing. Latavius Murray, I think, is definitely in play. Raheem Mostert, it was, like you said, it was good to see him back. He did only play 39% of the snaps, but he did see 16 carries. He ran 7 routes, 2 targets, 2 receptions, 43 total yards, and a touchdown. Not great. Hopefully, maybe they were just kind of easing him back in, especially for somebody that has, kind of been a little bit hit or miss this year and has really, been hampered by injuries. So we'll see if he does get more opportunities, but he did get a goal line touch and, found the end zone. So I do like Raheem Mostert a little bit this week. I think you could flex him as a fine spot for him. And then Cam Akers, like you said, like, listen, Sean McVay, just give him the fucking ball, okay? Stop giving the ball. I do not understand the fascination with Darrell Henderson. I do not. Darrell Henderson is not the answer. He's not the guy. Let him be the change of pace back, but let Cam Akers get 15 to 20 touches, because that's the way that's the way it should go. Cam Akers is the better running back, and hopefully we continue to see a trend where he gets the majority of the touches. They start phasing out, because right now it looks like it's between them two, and the Malcolm Brown is the odd man out at this point. So if they're able to do that, I think Cam Akers, is at least should be at least viewed as a flex option this week. Now, Jonathan Taylor, I really went back and forth with. I probably could have him a lot higher. They're getting Houston. Houston has been historically bad against the ground. Like, when I mean historically bad, I mean historically bad. They, at this point, it's not even close in terms of how many rushing yards they've allowed. They have given up the most rushing yards, and it's by at least 120. They've given up the most rushing touchdowns by 2, or no, they're tied with Detroit Lions in rushing touchdowns. They've been torched through the air. Like, this run defense is absolutely dreadful. And so Jonathan Taylor does make some sense and probably should be higher than what I have him right now. I am just skeptical. Is Frank Reich going to commit to him and give him the 20 touches that he should be getting? Because if he does not, and he plays some hot hand approach Like, this could be a game where Jonathan Taylor only sees the ball 5 to 10 times, and that's going to be tilting. So I don't think I can fully trust him. He's coming off the COVID. He's definitely going to be ready to come off that list. They've already said they're expecting him to return, as long as, he doesn't, a positive test doesn't come up, because it was a contact. That's why he was out this past week, but he's definitely going to be back this week. So I could definitely have Jonathan Taylor higher than this. I think he has a really high ceiling in this game. Wouldn't be shocked if this was his coming out party and he rushed for 120 yards and 2 touchdowns. Certainly in the range of possibility. Damian Harris gets a good matchup this week against the Chargers. The Chargers have struggled to stop the run. But the thing with the Chargers the thing with Damian Harris is he has no pass catching role whatsoever. So it's really hard if they get behind the Chargers in this game, which is certainly possible with the way Justin Herbert's been playing. Justin Herbert's been matchup proof. If that happens, then Damian Harris can be game scripted out. So that's why I have him there. Todd Gurley, they're playing the Saints. I want no part of Todd Gurley if he's even able to play this week. If anybody else plays like Ito Smith or Brian Hill, nope, I'm good. I'll pass on that. And then I hate myself for having Frank Gore on this list, but he played 80% of the opportunities last week. So somebody that's going to get that kind of opportunity, I think at the very least he could probably get you 10 fantasy points. And they're playing the Raiders, so I don't hate it. And then Chase Edmonds, I think, is a weekly flex option every single week because of his pass catching role. And then James White for the same reason.
I will just say, one, that I'm proud of you for finally including Frank Gore, but two, it is absolutely disrespectful to have Frank Gore and Jonathan Taylor so close in your rankings. The disrespect is dripping
we'll
from the screen.
And we'll see what happens. Like I said, I could totally see myself, depending on what we hear, what information comes out this week, see myself having him high. He has a really, really high ceiling this week. He really could end up being somebody that I could feel confident in putting as an RB1. This is a great fucking matchup. But trusting Frank Reich to actually do the right thing, because Jordan Wilkins could get a couple carries and bust off a 40-yard run, and next thing you know, they're giving all the carries to Jordan Wilkins. It is super frustrating, or Naheem Hines for that matter. So that is the only reason why I just have him a little bit lower, and I think he's a little bit risky because it is an excellent matchup.
Anyway, on that note, we're going to get out of here. Be sure to join us on Sunday whenever we go live to answer all of your lineup decisions. Please be sure to like this on YouTube if you're watching, and subscribe if you're listening to us on podcast form. Please be sure to subscribe, rate, and review. Best of luck in Week 13, and make sure you check out our other ranking content.